The story begins in a Russian prison, where we see a man named Frank Abagnale Jr. Frank is a very cunning con man who has pulled off some of the biggest scams. At this moment, an FBI agent named Carl has come to take him back to America. Carl is talking to Frank when suddenly Frank's health starts to deteriorate. At first, Carl thinks this is just another one of Frank's tricks. But then he realizes that no one can fake it this well. So, he rushes to get Frank to a hospital as quickly as possible. But Frank seizes the opportunity to escape from there as well. However, the police manage to catch him, and this is when Frank begins to recall his story from the very beginning. Frank was born into a very happy family. His parents loved each other deeply. One day, Frank's father took him to a shop to buy a suit. But the woman there said the shop was closed. Instantly, Frank's father pulled out a necklace and said, "Isn't this yours?" The woman was impressed by his quick wit and said, "No problem, you can buy the suit." Frank's father was a master of such tricks. Later, he told Frank to act as his driver and took him to the bank. Soon, the bank manager came to receive them. The truth was that Frank's father had suffered a huge business loss, and now he needed a loan from the bank. Because of another accountant, he had filed his taxes late, and as a result, he suffered major losses. But despite explaining everything, no bank was ready to help him. The government had seized his car, property, and money. Yet, despite this hardship, he still opened a bank account for Frank. Frank asked him, "Why are you doing this? You're already in debt." To this, his father replied, "Don't worry about me. Your whole life is ahead of you. You have to live well." Their lives had suddenly fallen into poverty, and Frank had to transfer to a new school. But on the very first day at this new school, a boy started bullying him. Mocking him, the boy said, "You look like a teacher. Wear clothes your age." Frank got furious at this remark, and instead of being embarrassed, he actually started pretending to be a teacher. He entered the classroom and told the real teacher, "What are you doing here? This is my class. I'll teach now, you come later." The poor teacher, confused, walked out. After that, Frank humiliated that boy in front of the entire class. A whole week later, the school finally discovered that a student had been teaching the class, and not just that, he was about to take the entire class on a field trip. The school immediately called Frank's parents. Frank's father appeared serious in front of the principal, but later, he laughed with Frank about it. One day, when Frank returned home, he saw another man in his mother's bedroom. This man worked with his father. His mother tried hard to act as if nothing was going on and even handed Frank some money, telling him to buy something for himself. But Frank had understood everything. A few days later, Frank's parents decided to separate. The lawyer asked Frank, "Do you want to live with your mother or your father?" Watching his family fall apart right in front of his eyes devastated Frank. He couldn't bear to see it anymore, so he ran away to another city. He didn't have much money, just a bank account and a checkbook. He kept writing checks and handing them to hotels. But as those checks started bouncing, the hotels threw him out. Then one day, an idea struck him. Checks can be altered. This was back in the older days, when technology wasn't that advanced. Taking advantage of this, Frank started making fake checks. He wrote different names on them and cashed them. And if a bank manager refused, Frank used his father's old tricks, like the necklace trick, to win them over. Slowly, however, his scams began to get noticed. His checks stopped working at banks. Then one day, Frank noticed a pilot standing outside a hotel. Everyone was treating the pilot with great respect. That's when Frank got the idea, why not become a pilot? Not a real one, but a fake one. That way, people would respect him, and his checks would be cashed easily. So, he posed as a reporter and went to the airport, saying he was writing an article on pilots. He gathered all the details about where pilots got their uniforms. Then he called the company and said his uniform was damaged and needed a new one. With a little trickery, he managed to get a brand new uniform. He was ready to pay by check, but the employee said, "I only need your pilot ID. You don't have to pay, the airline will cover it." Frank had already made a fake pilot ID, so he got the uniform for free. Next, he went to the bank with his checks. At the same bank where earlier no one cared about him. Now the manager himself came forward and personally cashed his checks. Then, Frank discovered from a hotel that he could even cash large checks, not just small ones, but they needed to look like salary checks. So Frank began making fake salary checks too. He even cut out logos from toy planes and stuck them onto the checks. When he went to cash one at the bank, the manager said, "Sir, you can cash this directly at the airport." That thrilled Frank, because at the airport, he could cash checks anytime. The receptionist asked him, "Are you flying with us today?" Frank confidently said yes, and she led him straight onto the plane. Pilots could fly for free, after all. Frank wasn't really a pilot, so he was terrified. But in front of everyone, he acted calm and confident. He even went to a beautiful air hostess and said, "Is this your necklace?" Using his father's old trick to impress her. Frank looked older than his actual age, so no one suspected that he was only about 22 or 23 and not a real pilot. He was enjoying life to the fullest. He even started flirting with a bank manager and learned the entire banking system, where checks came from, where they went, how account numbers were assigned. He discovered that banks used typewriters to encode checks, so he bought the exact same second-hand typewriter. Frank's work was no longer amateurish. His forgery had become professional. Slowly, he started pulling larger and larger amounts with his fake checks, and his fraud grew bigger and bigger. His activities soon reached the FBI, and the case was assigned to an agent named Carl. Carl was very serious about his job. One day, Frank went to meet his father, to whom he often wrote letters describing what he was doing. His father truly believed his son had become a real pilot and was extremely proud of him. Frank told him, "The government took everything from you, so I bought you a car with my earnings, the same one James Bond drives in the movies." But his father refused, saying, "After the tax scandal, the government is still after me. If I take this car, they'll seize it too." His father's store had already shut down. He was still struggling. Frank even offered him money, but his father said, "I can't take money from you." By now, Frank had understood the entire banking system of the country. He used checks from one state in another, exploiting the time lag between them. The FBI, meanwhile, was closely monitoring his every move. Soon, they tracked him to the hotel where he had last cashed a check. On inquiry, they found out that Frank was still staying there. He had been there so long that he was well known among the staff. Carl, gun in hand, stormed into Frank's room. Frank quickly realized that if he didn't think fast, he would be caught. So, in front of Carl, he acted calm and said, "Relax, relax. I'm from the Secret Service. Did you think you were the only one tracking this guy? The entire government is after him." Carl replied, "Show me your ID. Why should I believe that you are who you claim to be?" At this, Frank said, "You do one thing, just keep my entire wallet. Check it peacefully." Carl couldn't open the wallet with one hand. Then Frank told him, "Look, our men have already caught that con man. We got here before you did." Down below, somewhere, a neighbor was helping a blind man get into a car. From a distance, Carl thought that indeed the con man had been caught. Because of this, Carl also began to trust Frank. Frank picked up all his fake check-making equipment and told Carl, "The police will be here any moment. Till then, I'll just go put this evidence downstairs." By now, Carl had put his full trust in him. He even said, "Here, take your wallet too." But Frank deliberately said, "No, you keep it." And carrying all the important stuff, he fled from there. A little while later, when Carl finally opened the wallet, he found nothing inside. That cunning con man had escaped right in front of his eyes. Realizing this, Carl felt extremely humiliated. His boss scolded him badly too. In anger, Carl even snapped back at his boss. The way Frank kept pretending to be a pilot, this fact slowly started reaching the airlines themselves. Now, repeating the same scam again and again was becoming difficult. When the press found out about it, they gave Frank the nickname James Bond. Frank was thrilled by this and started wearing suits just like James Bond, and even bought a car like him. Slowly time passed, and the Christmas season came. Carl was alone, working in his office, when suddenly Frank called him and said, "For everything I've done to you until now, I want to apologize." Frank even gave him his address. But Carl said, "You're trying to trap me, right? I'm not falling for your tricks this time, son." Carl also added, "You may have money, but you're very lonely. That's why you're calling me." This hurt Frank deeply, and he hung up. But this time Frank was telling the truth. He really had given Carl his actual address. The last time Carl had spoken to Frank, Frank had given his name as Barry Allen, a comic book character. Carl had immediately realized in his office call that this was just a kid who only looked a little older than his actual age. His real age was very young. That's why they couldn't find him easily. So Carl said, "Make a list of runaway kids. Someone must have filed a missing person report." Through much investigation, Carl finally reached Frank's home, where he met Frank's mother. When she was shown Frank's photo, she confirmed, "Yes, that's my son." Carl told her, "He's a first-class con man. If you get any information about him, you must inform the police." Frank's mother replied, "Oh, he's just a child. He must have taken a little money to eat and survive." Picking up her purse, she said, "I'll pay you back." "How much does he owe?" Carl replied, $1.4 million, around $10 million. Hearing this, Frank's mother was stunned. Meanwhile, Frank had moved to another city and was living a very good life. He had some work at a hospital, so he went there. There, he saw a nurse named Brenda crying. Some doctor had scolded her for a mistake. Frank consoled her, saying, "Don't worry, you're amazing. That doctor is an idiot." At that moment, Frank got an idea. He asked Brenda, "Is there any job vacancy here?" Since becoming a pilot was now risky, Frank thought of becoming a doctor. He made himself a degree, not from anywhere small, but from Harvard, and went for an interview. The doctor present there was surprised. "Sir, will you really work in our small hospital?" Frank had watched many doctor movies beforehand to learn how to behave. So he replied, "Sir, I don't want to work in big cities. I want to help people in small towns." He was immediately hired. Frank didn't actually do any real work. He just gave random advice to doctors. In his free time, he and Brenda became very close. But one day suddenly, he was called for an emergency case. A small child was badly injured and bleeding. Seeing the blood, Frank froze. Still, Pretending to be confident, he asked another doctor, "What would you do here?" The doctor gave an answer, and Frank said, "Exactly right. I trust you to do it. I'll come back shortly to check if it was done well." Saying this, he walked away, but inside, he was panicking. Meanwhile, Carl went to meet Frank's father and told him all of Frank's deeds. Frank's father said, "I don't know where he is. And even if I did, I wouldn't tell you." Carl realized father and son were very close. Surely, Frank must be sending letters. From those letters lying around, Carl figured out where Frank might be living. Soon he and the police were ready to go there. Meanwhile, Frank and Brenda had fallen in love. One day Brenda started crying and told Frank, "I once had an abortion. After that, my father threw me out of the house." Frank thought for a moment and said, "If I talk to your father about marriage, will he accept you again?" Brenda was overjoyed by this. Frank went to meet Brenda's father, who was a lawyer. So Frank claimed, "I was also once a lawyer before I became a doctor." Having watched law-related films too, he managed to impress everyone. Brenda's father asked, "Tell me honestly, what does a man like you see in my daughter?" Frank replied, "I'm just an ordinary man who loves your daughter." This impressed Brenda's father greatly. Frank asked him, "If I wanted to practice law here, what would I need to do?" He replied, "You've already been to law school. You just need to pass an exam, and then you can practice." Frank actually studied, gave the exam, and became a lawyer. The story then shifted back to the present, where Carl had arrested Frank. Carl asked, "How did you pass that exam?" Frank replied, "Does it matter? You're taking me to jail, not to court, right?" The story flashed back again, showing Frank bonding with Brenda's family. He was about to marry Brenda. He expressed his wish to meet his father and told him, "Whatever the government took from us, I'll get it all back. Then you can bring Mom back, and we'll all be together again." But his father revealed that Frank's mother had married someone else. This devastated Frank. His father also said, "I know about your crimes." This shook Frank even more, and he left. That night, Frank called Carl and said, "I'm getting married. I want to forget everything between us." Frank wanted all charges against him to be dropped. Carl replied, "I'll never let you go. As long as I have this job, I'll keep chasing you. After all this, you can't escape." Then Carl had an idea. He knew after marriage Frank couldn't change his name. So he ordered a search for that doctor's name everywhere. He also reasoned that there must be a wedding invitation printed somewhere. He kept watch on these two. On Frank's wedding day, all the agents arrived. Seeing this, Frank rushed to his room with Brenda. There, he confessed everything, how he had been fooling people all along, but told Brenda his love for her was real. He told her, "I'll run away now. Meet me at the airport. Don't tell anyone where you're going." The next day, Frank waited at the airport. Brenda came, but not alone. She had agents with her. Escaping seemed impossible. Then Frank came up with an idea. He went to a college and announced that his airline was recruiting many air hostesses. After holding interviews, he selected many beautiful girls. Surrounding himself with them, dressed in a pilot's uniform, he entered the airport. The police officers were distracted by the girl's beauty, and Frank slipped away easily. Meanwhile, another boy who looked like Frank stood outside the airport in a car. All the FBI agents ran to catch him. When caught, the boy said, "Some guy paid me to stand here." Once again, Frank cleverly escaped the country. After that, he committed many major frauds in various countries. The last trace of Frank was of him making checks somewhere. Carl asked his seniors to let him go there to arrest Frank. But they refused. "We couldn't catch him in our own country. You think you'll catch him abroad?" Carl dug deeper and found out Frank was now printing his checks. He knew Frank was in Russia, but Russia is a huge country. Then Carl remembered that Frank's mother was from a small Russian village. After researching, he discovered there was a printing press there. It was Christmas Eve again. Carl went there and found Frank. Frank said, "Come, I'll show you around. Come outside with me." Carl warned him, "Don't try to run, or the police here will shoot you. If you surrender now, I can save you." Frank asked, "Swear on your children." Carl swore and said, "Believe me, I'm telling the truth." Hearing this, Frank put on the handcuffs. But when they came outside, no one was there. For a moment, Frank thought he had been tricked. But suddenly, many police cars arrived. The story returned again to the present. Carl and Frank were about to land in America. Frank said, "I want to talk to my father." Carl, with a heavy heart, told him, "Your father died. He slipped in the bathroom." Frank was devastated and went to the toilet, crying loudly. There wasn't much time left before the plane landed. But when Frank didn't come out, Carl broke the door. By then, Frank had removed a sink screw and slipped into the plane's lower compartment. As soon as the landing gears opened, Frank escaped. That night, he went to meet his mother. He saw she had built a new family, with a small daughter too. Carl knew Frank would definitely come to see his mother, so he arrived there and arrested Frank. Frank was still under 19. Carl wanted him to be treated as a minor, but the government wanted the harshest punishment for such a massive fraud. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, in complete isolation, unable to talk to anyone. One day, Carl came to meet him. Someone else had been committing frauds just like Frank did. Frank asked to see the check. The moment he saw it, he pointed out the flaw. Carl realized only Frank could help stop such crimes. The next time Carl came, he brought FBI agents along. They were impressed by Frank's methods too. Gradually, Carl got Frank out of prison and gave him a job at the FBI. He now had to work 8 hours a day. Life had given him another chance. But if he tried to run, he'd face 50 years in prison. Frank tried to work sincerely but got very bored. He even erased his own records from the FBI system. That weekend, he was about to escape abroad, but Carl stopped him. Carl said, "Look, you're just a kid. Life has given you another chance. Don't waste it. If you run, you'll spend your whole life in jail. I'm not going to stop you, but come back to work on Monday. Remember, no one is chasing you. You don't need to run." Frank left. On Monday, Carl waited anxiously. For a moment, he thought Frank had run again. But Frank returned and began solving cases brilliantly. Soon, Frank even found a girl, married her, and began living a better life. After making a name for himself at the FBI, he started his own company that worked to eliminate banking frauds. And after all, who better to catch thieves than a former master thief himself? This is a true story. Frank eventually became a millionaire the right way.